The movie begins by showing an FBI agent, Brandon Beckett, stalking the activities of FBI head Harvey Cusimano. Brandon was an FBI agent with exceptional skills in using sniper weapons, and he was the most reliable sniper in his unit. Brandon's reconnaissance operation that night was not an official operation but a covert operation he ran with Zero, his old partner. Zero was also an FBI agent in the same division as Brandon. He had been getting information about human trafficking perpetrated by a woman activist, Laura Lake. Laura Lake was known to the mainstream media as an activist who often fought for the protection of women and against the abusive practices of human trafficking. But it turns out Laura was the same person who ran the illegal business of prostitution and human trafficking by exploiting young girls for the most profit. That night, she was allegedly meeting with Commander Harvey to discuss their cooperation in the prostitution and trafficking of women business they had been running for so long. The next scene shows a brothel run by Laura's men, where all the young women live on an adult video platform to show off their nudity and bodies. Laura assigned all the guards at the place to kill all those poor girls before the FBI officers came. But a young man named Simon, who had fallen in love with one of the prostituted girls, Mary Jane, decided to save her by helping her get out of that place. Jane was confused with Simon, who suddenly sent her away from the site. But he didn't have enough time to explain all that to Jane and told her to quickly hide in a safe place. Simon also asked Jane to call him at the phone number he had slipped in her jacket once she was in a safe place. Meanwhile, Brandon was still watching Laura and Harvey, who were meeting across the building to discuss their illegal business. Harvey was a coordinator who often helped Laura to run the business smoothly. So, no law enforcement learned about the trading practices she was doing. At the brothel, a bodyguard named Gildy asked his team to get ready to kill the prostitutes before the FBI Special Operations came to their place. They prepared their weapons and began to kill those unfortunate women to eliminate witnesses from the criminal practices they had committed over the years. Some girls tried to escape, but no one survived the bodyguard's string of bullets. After all the girls were dead, Gildy and the others knew that one of the girls had disappeared. They tried to find the girl in all the rooms. After searching everywhere, they didn't see her. So, they decided to leave immediately because the FBI would be coming to the site in the next 30 minutes. After the mob left the site, a rescue squad from the FBI Special Forces arrived. They discovered all the girls in the area had been killed. Luckily, Brandon managed to catch Harvey when he intended to leave the hotel, where he had a secret meeting with Laura. The following at the U.S. Embassy in London, the vice chairman of the FBI, Gabriel Stone, scolded Brandon, who had arrested Commander Harvey without a warrant and conducted an unofficial reconnaissance operation secretly. Gabriel said that Brandon's investigation and arrest operation last night was reckless without strong evidence underlying the arrest. But Brandon denied it and explained that Harvey had been secretly conspiring with a criminal, Laura Lake, to run an illegal business of human trafficking against American girls. Hearing Laura Lake's name, Gabriel denied the allegations right away. He said Laura Lake was an activist who was actively campaigning the anti-trafficking in America. There was no way she would dare to commit the criminal act. But Brandon again convinced him that Laura was a greedy villain willing to exploit young girls and trade them just to make as much profit as possible for herself. Furthermore, he explained that Laura had been smuggling young American girls into London through the border with the help of Commander Harvey. As the head of an American border patrol, Harvey had full authority to determine who could safely cross the border without being known to London border security officers. During this time, Harvey always got massive commissions from Laura. Her human trafficking business ran safely, and she could smuggle in young girls easily. Not only that, but information about the prostitution practice arrest operation carried out by the FBI rescue team last night had also been leaked by Harvey to Laura. She and her team then killed the girls to eliminate the witness. That's why the FBI arrest operation failed, and they could not find a single mobster on the spot. They only saw the prostitute girls who had been killed by the mob. Brandon also explained that he got all that information from his colleague, Zero, who had been asking him to keep an eye on Harvey's suspicious movements. Shortly after, Harvey, who had been released from FBI custody, came to Gabriel's office and said he would explain what happened the other night. He said that Brandon had been misunderstood by thinking of him as the person Laura was working with. Harvey had only been trying to get close to Laura to gather more information about her illegal business. At last night's meeting, Harvey deliberately asked Laura to meet at a hotel because he wanted to arrest her. But when he got there, Laura was found to have done the unthinkable in the hotel room. Since Brandon still didn't trust him, Harvey proved all his statements by submitting evidence of a crime scene investigation where Laura Lake ended her life. Unexpectedly, Gabriel trusted Harvey's words and then asked Brandon to apologize to Harvey for the unlawful arrest he made yesterday. Due to the unofficial reconnaissance operations conducted by Zero and Brandon, both would be subject to sanctions. Zero would be dismissed from the FBI, while Brandon was suspended for several weeks. Meanwhile, at the mob's hideout, the mobster head called Dax just got word from his men. The girl who had escaped was currently at the police station, and the FBI agent will pick her up in a few moments. Knowing this, Dax ordered his men to quickly go to the police station and kill the girl before the FBI picked her up. Soon, two mobsters rushed to the police station and got ready in the building opposite the police station to carry out their mission to kill the girl. Gildy, who was the sniper of the mob, had prepared his weapon and started pointing it at the police station window. He was waiting for the opportunity as the girl approached the window. Shortly after, Zero, who had not known that he had been fired, came to the police station to pick up Jane. He asked Jane if she had seen Harvey before. Unfortunately, the police did not allow Zero to take her away because they could not identify his FBI identity, which was apparently erased from the police database. As the confused Jane approached the window, Gildy prepared to fire at Jane's head. But she found a piece of paper bearing Simon's name on the floor and immediately picked up the paper. As a result, Gildy's shot was missed and instead hit the police officer behind Jane, creating chaos. Zero used that opportunity to get Jane out of there. After the two had escaped the police station and boarded Zero's car, Gildy shot at Jane, but it was still missed. Zero and Jane managed to escape. In the meantime, Gabriel went to meet Brandon in a park to tell him that he believed in everything he had said before, but he didn't want to involve Brandon in any more significant problems. Gabriel explained that several other FBI agents had previously tried to make arrests against Harvey. The FBI agents in the previous administration had tried to do the same, but Harvey could be freed from all those charges by using all his money and power. Therefore, Gabriel wants to ask Brandon and Zero to proceed with Harvey's capture operation in secret. He hoped that this time they could arrest Harvey with his accomplice. When Gildy and the rest of the mob returned to the mob base and told Dax that they had failed to kill Jane, Dax was angry because she could have leaked information about their mob. Meanwhile, Zero took Jane to rest in his ex-wife's house. He thought the place was safe for Jane to hide at the moment. Shortly after Zero and Jane greeted Zero's ex-wife, Brandon came to meet Zero and discuss their next plan. Zero learned that, at the moment, they did not have official permission to conduct an investigation because their staffing status as state security officers was dormant. However, Brandon and Zero were determined to expose all of Harvey and Laura Lake's criminal practices over the years. Their criminal network had taken on too many victims. Brandon and Zero planned to ask their old colleague, Lady Death, for help. She was actively working as a waiter in a cafe restaurant. The relationship between Lady Death and Brandon isn't very good. In the previous year, Lady Death was an agent who got a mission to commit murder against Brandon. But after the mission was cancelled, Lady Death decided to stop being an agent and start an everyday life away from war or murder. On that day, when Lady Death learned that Brandon had arrived at her cafe, she immediately rushed away from the cafe and asked her colleague Pete to take Brandon somewhere. But when Brandon entered a quiet alley, Lady Death suddenly attacked him from behind. She thought that Brandon intended to kill her. Brandon tried to convince Lady Death that his purpose in coming to see her was to ask for help. But she kept attacking Brandon, so there was a short fight between them. Shortly after, Zero and Jane stopped the battle between them. In Lady Death's apartment, Zero told her they planned to run an arrest mission against one of the biggest mafias who trafficked human beings against young American girls. The leader of the human trafficking network is the corrupt FBI chief working with a criminal, Laura Lake, to smuggle girls into London. Therefore, they need the help of Lady Death to join the mission and assist in arresting the human trafficking mafia syndicate. At first, Lady Death refused the invitation because she did not want to get involved. But she changed her mind after Jane told her that the girls being smuggled were the orphanage girls Laura had promised to meet their parents in America. But it turned out they were smuggled into London. All victims of human trafficking were poor girls with great hopes of meeting their parents, but they were tricked and ended up as sex slaves and prostitution. After Lady Death agreed to join the mission, Zero asked Jane to contact Simon, who had helped Jane escape the shelter. They would dig up information about the time and place of human smuggling. Since they didn't want the enemy to trace their current location, Brandon and the others decided to ask Pete for help, who happened to be a very talented hacker. Unfortunately, when Jane called Simon, the person who took the call was another mob member. The man reported the call to Dax. Knowing this, Dax asked Simon to contact Jane because they would use the opportunity to capture Jane and kill her. They started creating a plan to lure Jane to meet Simon somewhere and then kill her secretly. At the same time, Gabriel and his team also began to move to pursue human trafficking cases involving Harvey and Laura Lake. Gabriel felt that he had to complete the case before he retired. In the evening, Gabriel went to see Harvey and told him that he had found out about him who had faked Laura Lake's death. Harvey made a fake crime scene report to protect Laura from the FBI. Gabriel promised Harvey that one day his team would manage to expose all crimes that Harvey and Laura had been hiding. But Harvey, who felt in charge of the law, challenged Gabriel to continue investigating the case because he was interested in what would happen next. Meanwhile, Jane told Brandon and Zero that Simon had contacted her and asked her to meet him at a coffee shop downtown. Hearing this, they had a feeling that the mafia gang might have been planning to kill her. So, they planned to take and protect Jane at the meeting. By the day of the meeting, Gildy was getting ready with his sniper on the roof of the building. Simon, who was behind Gildy, was suddenly killed by Dax for being considered to have betrayed their group. The same thing was done by Brandon's team, where he and Zero watched Jane from a building in front of the coffee shop and start preparing with Brandon's flagship sniper, while Lady Death accompanied Jane by sitting in the chair behind her. When Jane and Lady Death arrived at the coffee shop, they seemed confused because Simon didn't want to come to the cafe without knowing that he had been killed by Dax. On the other hand, Brandon and Gildy searched for their enemy's location using the sniper telescopes, but they couldn't find anyone. Without them noticing, the two snipers were staking out of the same building. Gildy was on the roof of the building, while Brandon was in the room on the top floor. Shortly after, a shot started to be fired, and chaos occurred. Jane immediately ran to a safe place while Lady Death fought against Dax's men. Dax, annoyed by Gildy's constant missed shots, decided to go downstairs to chase Jane directly. At the same time, Zero intended to go to the roof of the building. He wanted to check if there was an enemy sniper up there. He accidentally met Dax in the elevator. At that moment, Dax intended to fire Zero, but Zero managed to turn the direction of the shot and began to fight fiercely against Dax. After a pretty intense fight between the two, Zero defeated Dax. Meanwhile, Brandon also could take out Dax's men who had almost captured Jane. After they managed to bring Jane back safely, they again gathered at Lady Death's apartment to hack into information from Dax's phone that Zero had previously obtained. After scanning all the files on the phone, Pete found out that the container containing the rest of the girls was coming in a few days. They also knew the location of the port that would be the location where the containers would be smuggled, so Brandon and the others immediately rushed off to the site. After preparing the strategy and the weaponry needed, they set out for the port of Philadelphia, where the smuggling of human containers was to take place. Upon Brandon's arrival and his team at the harbor, they immediately found the mobsters who were tasked with overseeing the human smuggling process that happened that night, and they started conducting reconnaissance. Elsewhere, Gabriel secretly sneaks into Harvey's house in search of all the evidence that can prove all the crimes Harvey has committed over the years. Gabriel finally found a fake document Harvey used to fake Laura Lake's death a while back. After beating some guards in the house, Gabriel took Harvey down and took him to the FBI office. At the same time, Lady Death showed her epic action in incapacitating the members of the human trafficking mob at the port. Brandon and Zero were still focused on scouting. They also had to fight against several other mob members who had found out where they were. At the same time, Gildy, on top of a ship, was ready to fire Brandon, who was fighting with other mob members. But fortunately, Zero shot him and the rest of the mob before Gildy could fire at Brandon. All the members of the mafia had been subverted. They contacted the police and the authorities to rescue the girls confined in containers to return to their families. Shortly after, Brandon got a call from Gabriel informing him that Laura was currently in America and she was most likely also in the container. Hearing this, Brandon learned that Laura had escaped from the place by pretending to be one of the victims of human trafficking. At that time, she immediately killed the medical workers on the way to the hospital. Laura had run quite far from the location where the ambulance was found. She decided to ask for a ride to one of the cars passing on the highway so she could leave the city immediately. But without Laura noticing, the person who gave her a ride was Jane, who used the opportunity to kill Laura. The following day, Gabriel started working on a retirement letter at the FBI with satisfaction after solving a human trafficking case that had so far failed to resolve. The film ended with a scene where Brandon, Zero, and Lady Death had been formally appointed FBI Special Forces agents thanks to their contribution to the fund uncovering human trafficking practices perpetrated by corrupt FBI leaders. The moral that can be learned from this movie is that telling the truth and upholding justice is a challenging journey. However, these obstacles should allow us to do the right thing for society and the people around us.